Hello fellow cineenthusiasts, my name is Christina and welcome to another Let's Get Reel's movie review. Today is Classic Movie Thursdays, my version of Throwback Thursdays. Today's movie is the entire reason I fell ass over ankles for classic films and how I came to understand why Alfred Hitchcock is considered one of the greatest movie directors ever. It is his first American film, Rebecca, based off the amazing novel by Daphne du Maurier. The film begins with what is probably one of the greatest narrations in a film ever. The story is told as a flashback by a young woman simply billed as the second Mrs. De Winter, played by Joan Fontaine. She tells us, "Last night I dreamt I went to Manderley again," and the camera pans along an abandoned driveway up to a neglected, burned-out mansion, according to her dream. After she explains her dream, the story goes back to how it all began. The nameless young girl was working as a companion to an annoying older lady. One day, while walking along a cliffside, she sees a man at the edge, and thinking he was going to kill himself, she yells out to him to stop. He turns around and angrily yells at her, and she runs away. That night at the hotel, the older man and the younger woman meet again. He apologizes and introduces himself as Maxim de Winter. The old lady becomes sick, and this leaves the young woman to do as she pleases. She meets Maxim again, and they spend every day together after that. When the old lady is feeling better, she is ready to leave the hotel, but the young woman is not, and she desperately tries to get in touch with Maxim. When she finally does, he asks her to marry him so that she doesn't have to leave. The old woman is very apprehensive about this. She tells the young girl that she will never be able to live up to Maxim's first wife, Rebecca, who is a beautiful socialite and well-liked by everyone. After the honeymoon, Maxim brings his new bride to his castle-like countryside home on the English coast. Almost immediately, the new bride feels the presence of Maxim's first wife, Rebecca, who had died a year before and who everybody loved, especially her maid, Mrs. Danvers, who Maxim kept on. As time goes on, the young woman is driven mad by the mention and thought of Rebecca and even begins to fear for her life. Besides Hitchcock's direction, the film never would have worked without its three main actors. Alfred Hitchcock knew that he wanted Joan Fontaine for the role of the second Mrs. De Winter, but the producer, David Selznick, had casted and produced Gone with the Wind the year before, and he had this whole big audition process for Gone with the Wind to find Scarlett, and that had drummed up so much publicity for that movie that he wanted to do it again for Rebecca. Hitchcock said that he felt embarrassed for all these women coming and auditioning for this role when all along he knew he wanted Joan Fontaine, because she had this very young, innocent look to her, and she was still kind of starting out. This probably was her first major starring role, because before that she had always been either like a girlfriend or just a supporting character, and never really the main star of a film. Joan Fontaine was so perfect for the role because she excellently portrayed these feelings of being overwhelmed, of paranoia and anxiety and fear. But that was probably down to the fact that Laurence Olivier was really pissed off that his then-girlfriend Vivien Leigh did not get her part. He wanted her to play the second Mrs. De Winter, but Hitchcock had said that, yeah, Vivien Leigh would have been great for this movie, but her character is not shown in the movie at all, meaning she would have been great to play Rebecca. So Laurence Olivier was very, very hostile to Joan Fontaine during the process because he was pissed. And then Alfred Hitchcock also said that everyone was out to get her. What a great guy. Now, Laurence Olivier, I am not really a fan of. To me, he always seems to play the same kind of characters over and over again, but I haven't seen too many of his movies. I've seen his earlier movies, so that just maybe why, to me, he always seems to be playing the same characters. He plays these charming British men, and actually, this time, it worked. I actually liked him in the role as Maxim. I've read the novel several times since first watching the movie, and whenever I read the book, I see Laurence Olivier in my mind. He is Maxim. I don't think they could have gotten a better Maxim. And where to even begin with Mrs. Danvers, with Judith Anderson playing Mrs. Danvers. The woman was the epitome of an evil character, and she played Mrs. Danvers above and beyond perfection. Hitchcock said that Mrs. Danvers never moved. He never wanted to show this creepy, eerie woman moving at all, because to move her would humanize her, and we're not supposed to like her at all. And Judith Anderson just has that face, that very severe, and it's just, you never hear her, you never really see her until the second Mrs. De Winter does, and then you are scared right along with her, because you just could not see Mrs. Danvers coming at all in this. And you have to kind of imagine, as you're watching the story, all the hate that was in this house and all the indiscretion that happened. And the memory of Rebecca is such an antagonist to this story, because it drives our poor main character almost out of her mind. You know, everybody is always like, oh, Rebecca was so gorgeous, Rebecca did this, Rebecca did that, she held great parties, Maxim absolutely adored her, and she just feels like she can never live up to this woman who's been dead for a year, and she can never control the house as it should be controlled by a more well-adjusted and more comfortable mistress of the house than she is. As I mentioned, this is the film where I came to truly see and understand why Hitchcock is considered one of the greatest directors of all time. And the scene that solidified that for me, and also solidified my love for classic films, was where Maxim describes the night that Rebecca died. Maxim says that she had been sitting on the couch talking to him, and then she gets up and she starts walking towards the door. Now, as he's saying this, Hitchcock picks up the camera when Maxim says that Rebecca stood up, and then when he describes how she's walking away, Hitchcock pans the camera and her movements. That right there, I thought, was just so incredibly genius, and it was just such a great scene, and it just said so much without a person even needing to be in there, that it just, I mean, I can remember sitting there, this was years and years ago, sitting on my couch watching this scene for the first time, and my mind just being blown. I absolutely loved it, and from that moment on, I wanted to see more Hitchcock's movies, and I wanted to see more classic movies. I just thought it was so great, and to this day, it is probably one of my all-time favorite scenes from a movie. Rebecca is based off the novel by Daphne du Maurier. The book is just as suspenseful as the movie. And what makes the book so fascinating to me is after I found out that the story is based off of fears that Daphne du Maurier lived through herself. Du Maurier lived on the English coast, much like Maxim does in his big house, and she liked this house on a cliffside like Manderley called Menabilly. She always dreamed of living there, and her husband was a naval officer. He was very wealthy, and they had a lot of servants. Du Maurier was always afraid to tell the servants what to do. She grew up in the house, and in a wealthy household herself, but she was always friends with the servants, and she never felt comfortable giving them orders of what to do in the house or anything, and her husband always kind of like chastised her for that, and that kind of scarred her a little bit. Also, at one time, her husband had been engaged to another woman, but they broke it off, and the woman came and lived with them for a while, and years later killed herself, and her husband never got over that. So this was all the basis for the story of Maxim, for Rebecca, for just haunting Maxim, and the servants and Mrs. Danvers just being this domineering woman and this younger girl being so afraid of the help and afraid, really, of the memory of her predecessor. I really hope you do like my review of Rebecca, even though it was not as coherent as I had hoped it would be. Rebecca is just such a wonderful, wonderful classic film. It is my favorite Hitchcock movie. If you ever want to start off watching Hitchcock movies, forget Psycho, forget Vertigo, The Man Who Knew Too Much with Jimmy Stewart, forget his later ones. Go back and watch his films in the 40s, starting with Rebecca and then going forward with The Paradine Case, Spellbound, Notorious, all his 1940s movies. I think they are what makes Hitchcock such a legend in film history and as a director. Thank you for watching my review of Rebecca. If you like this in any way, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment down below so we can discuss this more, and subscribe to Let's Get Reels right over here for future movie reviews and more Classic Movie Thursdays. As always, keep watching movies and stay absolutely fabulous.